First of all, welcome to this seminar. I am very privileged to meet each one of you. It is actually my dream as an educator to continue or one day work for developing countries. And so this is really a wonderful opportunity that I have given to me to prepare this workshop for each one of you. I hope that it will be useful because I do not have as many or as much experience working in developing countries, like all our ADB colleagues and friends. But I think I have a lot of experience in teacher education. And from the experience, I will share with you some of my ideas, my questions that I still struggle with, and some of my thoughts, as well as some of the learning I have received over the past months myself as a teacher educator. So I was asked by ADB and Hate Foundation to talk about preparing teachers for the new normal. And in this topic, all of you are teacher educators, and we all are in the same community. And our role as teacher educators is to prepare teachers. In the earlier conversation before we started, someone said, "What is this new normal?" I don't like that word, the new normal. When will we ever go back to normality? So I want to thank you for making the time, because I know that all of you are very busy teacher educators and took the time to attend this training. Okay, let me first introduce myself. And I think I'm quite close to someone that is in our group. I'm also a geography teacher. So I started off teaching high school geography and English language, both at secondary school and at high school. And then I went on to work as a teacher educator, because the Minister of Education spoke to me and said, if you're just a teacher, your influence are just the classes that you teach. But if you're a teacher educator, your influence and your impact will be much better, because you are training teachers. And so I've been a teacher educator for 36 years. Now that's a long time. And I'll be retiring soon from my institution. And what do I do at NIE? I train geography teachers. I train secondary social studies teachers, as well as I do some work in moral education. But my expertise is in the area of curriculum and curriculum studies. And so much of my work is on the design of curriculum, curriculum implementation, and curriculum and program evaluation. In terms of the pedagogical repertoire that I have and expertise in, my area of work is in group work and collaborative learning. My name is Christine Lee, CL, and so I think I'm born into collaborative learning. I'm also in the area of lesson study, because over time, I begin to realize that when we work with teachers and we give them one-off workshop, and we teach them in courses at NIE, and we ask them to implement it in the classroom, in their practice, it does not happen. And so my life's work the last 10 years has been in lesson study, which is the form of teacher professional development that I learned in Japan, where I work alongside teachers in situ, in the schools, and I do a lot of classroom observations. And so as a researcher, I align my research with my teaching expertise and interests. And more recently, my research is on lesson study and how teachers learn in professional learning communities. But I'm also, as a teacher, researcher, very much an administrator. And so I also run 2 departments in NIE, and I was the Vice Dean of the School of Arts. And so I hope that within this group, I know we have people with a lot of experience and expertise. And so I hope that we will learn from each other during this seminar. In this format, we will have a lecture followed by Q&A after the icebreaker. And after that, we will have a break, a bio break after a long time. And then we will have a group discussion in breakout rooms. We're broken into smaller groups and we put you into different countries to learn from one another. And then you come back and you share your group discussion. And then I will summarize the day's proceedings. This is the frame of my seminar today. I think whatever it is, we always have to have a vision. And so the first question that I am putting forward for us to consider is that as we prepare teachers for the new normal, what competencies and what dispositions do we as teacher educators need? And I hope that this afternoon will provide a space for you to think about the challenges we face as teacher educators in the new normal. But in spite of the crisis that is here with us and the challenges that we face, how can we turn this into opportunities? And in all that we do in our opportunities, what action can we bring? What can we do to bring about a better new normal in our own teacher education institution? So this would be the frame in which we will have today's seminar. Someone asked the question, what is the new normal? I don't like that word. I think all of us know the past months. And Lee shared with us about the face mask. All of us, when we walk out our homes, have to wear a face mask. And sometimes we forget and we run back to our homes or to our car to pick the face mask. And sometimes it is very uncomfortable, especially when we're having a conversation, when we are teaching, it is very uncomfortable. But as socially responsible individuals, we have no choice but to use the face mask. And it's really a new way of living because we cannot no longer be able to meet in groups, on large groups. And for some of us, you know, in Singapore, only 5 people can visit your home at any one time. And if you have a large family, all your family members cannot gather in your home. And how we interact is very different. In Singapore, I can no longer go to schools and work with teachers in their classrooms in the schools. I can no longer do professional development face-to-face. I had to use Zoom. And that is the policy for now in the COVID situation. And I think we will be in this situation for a very long time, whether we like it or not. So let go of the idea that one day we can return to normal. Let go of the idea. We have to realize that when things will change, things are changing, things evolve. And so instead of just going back to normal, we will have an evolution of the landscape in our lives, in our work, to a new normal. So it's very unsettling for many of us, but let's look at change and let's see change as bringing opportunities as well as challenges, not just challenges. So let's focus and look at this situation with new lenses. That's why I brought my spectacles, because my spectacles allow me to read. And we hopefully, through our conversation and through the work that we do, we will develop new eyes and make new meaning. It's a time for learning. It's a time for reflection. It's a time for us as teachers and teacher educators to grow and to improve. So in NIE, the way that I do, like now, it's so strange for me to do a workshop through Zoom for 5 countries. Usually we're all flown to one location and we have our training workshop together, but Zooming is our way of life. And so in my institution, in the courses that we run, we do a lot of Zooming. So I'm sure in your institution, some of you use other platforms, Google Meet, Skype, and so on. And so these are different ways that we meet. And this is a picture, which is my first post-lesson discussion with a group of teachers during this period. And you see the principal and teachers from different schools. In the Singapore schools, the same thing. Our teachers teach using Zoom. And in order to make children feel that they're part of a community, these teachers ask them to bring something that they love to class and talk about it. But what I like is this picture on the left, the bottom left, and how the teacher teach using Zoom. But behind her, she has a whiteboard. And in the whiteboard, she do an experiment and do shadow play. So we see this in our schools where we have social distancing and the taking of temperature is part and parcel. In our community, we also see what has happened because of COVID-19. In Singapore, we have a group of families who have no access to internet, no access to computers. So they cannot afford internet services. They used to go to McDonald's to do the homework because at McDonald's, it is free Wi-Fi, but McDonald's closed for 2 months, but they had to study. They have to do the home-based learning, even though schools are closed. And so beyond social services, for which I'm a volunteer, they did a community project and they put the wireless connection on the wall of the shared space. So you see this wireless connection, and 300 low-income families have internet access because of the high-speed fiber broadband. So what is our response to the pandemic, and what will be our response to the new normal? We heard this through all the country reports yesterday. All 5 country reports talked about that the one important response is online learning. And online learning is what is happening in many of our countries. But we are saying also that online learning does not do everything for us. In Singapore and in other countries, we talk about blended learning, where there's some face-to-face teaching and there's some face-to-face teaching and online learning. And with that, we talk about e-pedagogies. And so we know that when we do online learning and blended learning, we depend on the internet and access to internet and connectivity. But we also know that in countries, as we heard yesterday, that they don't have that. And so you do broadcasting to television, to radio, and many countries have smartphones. And in the very rural areas in your countries, you send textbooks. We hear in Lao PDR how they send curriculum materials to homes that have no access to the internet in response to the issue of connectivity and access. I thought this is quite interesting to show to you, right? When we were in our schools, you always tell the children, you cannot have phone in the school. Leave your phone at home or put it in your desk. But today, all of you said, your phone is very important because everything is in your phone. And today, the school is inside the phone because the majority of people have at least a phone. Okay, so this is so basic to our lives. And so now the school is inside the phone. And when I look at and read about your country over the weeks, it is quite evident that you have all these things, you know, that the new normal the context that we work in as teacher educators, the context is that of working with computers and with broadcast materials and so on. And that is the world that we have to work in. And we have to think about how we have to reimagine this world and think of possibilities. But when we use technology today, the focus is not on the technology nor the tools. That is not my role today. Tomorrow, you will have a session by Professor Lim. He will focus about technology in greater detail. But today, we will look at pedagogy and practice. How important our pedagogy is as teachers, as teacher educators. So technology is an enabler of pedagogy. So technology can amplify great teaching, but great technology cannot replace poor teaching. So what we sometimes see is that we replace poor teaching methods and put it on a computer screen. That will not work. With all of you as adult learners, it is very easy to do a Zoom webinar because as adult learners, you will pay attention and you will listen. But with children, you cannot do that. You cannot give a lecture for 1 hour with children and with students. You have to use different ways and different modes of teaching and pedagogy and design that experience for them. We as teacher educators, we are supposed to be experts of pedagogy. We train teachers how to teach. We train teachers what to teach, how to teach, why we are teaching what we are teaching, and how do we know our students have learned. That's what we do as teacher educators. And so as teacher educators, we have to role model this in the context of blended learning or technology. And that is not easy, I can tell you that. So the heart of learning is not technology, it is in pedagogy. So technology cannot just change methods of teaching and learning. It can also elevate the role of teachers from imparting received knowledge towards working as co-creators of knowledge. And so how in our design of activities during our online lessons that we have, how can we co-create and share with our students? How do we provide opportunities for dialogue among the students that we have in the class? And how do we assess what they have learned? So these are things, but what is wonderful about technology, and this is what I love about technology, is that it allows teachers and students to access specialized materials well beyond the textbooks. The textbook is only often a limited representation of the curriculum, of the syllabus. There's so much knowledge out there in the world that we can learn from. And for many of us, Google is our friend. When we do not know something, we Google for the information. We Google for the knowledge that is not with us in our country, but perhaps in a different context, in a different country. And what is important, we try to make sense of that and adapt it. So what is wonderful about technology is that it really bridges time and space. So when you attend a webinar or you register for a webinar and you can't finish all of it, you won't have time to go to be at that meeting. It's recorded. When you have the time, you can listen to the webinar. As today, in today's webinar, We transcend space and boundaries across 5 countries, and with Singapore, 6 countries, and there are other people from other countries also in the same community space. And therefore, what we as teacher educators have to do is to find new ways of teaching with technology that focus learners as active participants. This is what we need in the 21st century. And this is the recommendation from OECD. So I like to think of a metaphor for teachers and a metaphor for teacher educators. I think a very important metaphor is that of a designer. What does a designer do? Things do not happen by chance, by randomness. Things happen because we design the space, either the physical space, either the social space, either the emotional space. We bring all these in various intersections and we design so that they will synergize and communicate and interact with each other. And we have to design our learning and our teaching in blended learning contexts. And this will be the modality for the new normal. So we ask ourselves if we have this context for the new normal and how we as teachers and teacher educators have to work. If that is our context, what competencies, skills, and dispositions do we need as teacher educators to prepare teachers for the new normal? I had to learn how to use the Mentimeter. The Mentimeter is a kind of a poll. I wanted to do this with all of you, but my concern was because of internet connection in your countries, there may be a couple of issues. And therefore, I decided not to do it with you on live, but to do it with my teacher educators, my friends in NIE. And so you may want to explore the mentimeter.com and see how you can poll responses. So I asked the teacher educators in NIE, and I said, what competencies, skills, and dispositions do teacher educators need to prepare teachers for the new normal? But before I show you what the teacher educators share with me, perhaps if you take a piece of paper, maybe you write down what you think what you would need to prepare teachers. So I give you just a few minutes and you just write down on a post-it that our Japanese friend has or any piece of paper what you think are the competencies, skills, and dispositions that we as teacher educators need to prepare teachers for the new normal. So reflect on this question and write down on a piece of paper what you think are the competencies, skills, and dispositions that teacher educators need to prepare teachers for the new normal. Either you write it on a piece of paper or you could write it in the chat space. So let's compare what you have written, what you reflected and thought about, to the 19 NIE teacher educators, what they thought we need. And this is what they said. The most important disposition for them is adaptability. That as teacher educators, we just have to adapt to the situation in order to flourish in the new normal. So adaptability is something that they found to be very, very important. So if we look at the results of the Mentimeter in the word cloud, the larger the word means more people gave that as a response. The other one is flexibility. And so flexibility is very important. Okay, we had to be flexible when classes are rearranged, when students can no longer come to school, we have to teach and yet be flexible about that. But what is important is that they all use different words, but they all mean the same thing. How to use ICT, how to think about TPCK, technological, pedagogical content knowledge. About, for instance, things like e-pedagogy, ICT skills. So technology is something, the skills of technology is something that is very important for teacher educators for the new normal. I'm about to retire. I'm in my late 60s, but I had to learn teaching Zoom. I had to learn using the computer. And it took me a while to learn that. You know, I had to be adaptable to some of the things that I had to do. But what I think is also important are things that they talk about, which is empathy. Because our students are going through a very difficult time. Our own colleagues are going through a very difficult time. Some of our colleagues are from overseas. They cannot go home for the vacation and come back to Singapore. And so the disposition of empathy and care is really very important for them. So these are some of the things that they said are really very, very important for the 21st century, as well as for teaching in the new normal. Let me share with you these attributes of 21st century teaching professional for NIE. This is our vision of what we want our student teachers to be. And this vision, we call it V3SK. There are 3 important values in our vision and the various skills and the various knowledge. So we call it the V3SK. And if we look at the V3SK, we are having conversations in NIE, and I'm sure conversations also in your teacher education. What is the vision of teachers that we want to have for the new normal? Some aspects of our vision, some aspects of our framework and the attributes of teachers, of student teachers, is more important than others. And we have found, for instance, in the values that we want our student teachers to have, we want them to have empathy, the value of diversity of students, the quest for learning, the strive to improve, adaptive and resilient, and as well as collaborative learning and practice, and social responsibility and engagement. So we want them all to show this value in the new normal. And in the skills that we want them to have, we want them to have good pedagogical skills. We want them to have people management skills. We want them to be able to manage themselves well, communication skills, facilitative skills, reflective skills, thinking dispositions, and being innovative and have social emotional intelligence. And in the knowledge that we want our teachers to have, knowledge of self, of pupil, of community, of subject content, of pedagogy, and of curriculum. So in NIE, we're having conversations and re-examining our attributes of our student teachers, the vision of the kinds of competency, skills, and dispositions that we want our teacher educators to have. And what we found is that some things are more important than others, and some things we have to prioritize and to consider that more deeply in the way that we teach and in the way that we design our courses so that we can see this developing in our student teachers. So really, it is a space that we must navigate. We have no choice. We have to look, to know, to think, and to understand and to teach beyond the boundaries of the local community in which we live in. And this is a quote from Professor Lin Goodwin from Hong Kong. So while we have this vision of what we teacher educators have to do and what we have to work towards and develop in ourselves as teachers and teacher educators, let's consider in this time as we try to move forward, what are the challenges we face as teacher educators in the new normal? And I would like you to write the challenges that you face as teacher educators in the new normal in the chat space. Please write in the chat room, in the chat, what are the challenges you face as teacher educators in the new normal? I'll give you some time. Just write in the chat space. What are the challenges you face as teacher educators in the new normal? I really like this comment from our friend from Cambodia, say that I really do not know what to say because we have not arrived at the new normal. So we do not know how the new normal will be like. We cannot teach swimming as you have never swum before. So that's really an interesting comment. So how can you imagine the new normal? So you have to imagine the new normal. And if it's that the new normal, what do you think could be challenges for you? I really like this comment. We may learn with our student teachers on what to do at the new normal. And that's true. Because in Singapore, when our teachers had to teach using computers for home-based learning when schools are closed, guess who helped them? Our student teachers. They are very good with technology. And so they are the ones that taught the teachers what to do with the computers. Or when the teachers had problems, they would go to the student teachers who know technology a lot more than us. So I too learn from my student teachers and from my teachers. So I do not know about you, but I think one of the challenges I have is that our own well-being is affected by the pandemic. These are some of the challenges that we have. And for some of us, we go through a lot of fear, we go through a lot of grief, and we go through a lot of pain and isolation. For me, I'm considered a senior citizen because I'm 67 years old. And when the pandemic started, a friend said to me, Christine, if you have the COVID-19, you will have it bad because you're of your age and you have other underlying conditions. I'm a cancer survivor. I have asthma, and you will have it bad. So there was a lot of fear in the early months, in March, in April. And I think for some of us, even though we say our schools are opening and are going to open in September, we never know when will be the second wave of infection. We never know. And this is something that is uncertain ahead of us. And so we have to take care of our own well-being. And as we have this challenge ourselves as teacher educators, our own well-being, so are our student teachers, and so are our teachers. And I don't know about you, but I have a PhD student right now who is my colleague. And she's supposed to submit her dissertation by the end of this year, but she cannot. She has to teach online, and she feels overwhelmed and overworked. She needed more time to prepare her lessons. But for many of us, we even had to understand the online tools, what to do, and it takes time to learn. And so today she just applied for an extension of a PhD program because she felt overwhelmed and she needs more time to do her final dissertation. And so we have students like that, particularly many of our graduate students cannot collect data in school. Their research is being affected. And as doctoral students, if you have doctoral students, you know how difficult that must be for them. The worry that they cannot complete and pass their doctorate because they spend so many years pursuing a doctorate degree. And so this is a challenge that all of us face, as well as our students. And we need to be aware of this. And while things are better in many of our countries, we have to continue working on this part so that when things happen in the future, we are ready and we are resilient to do that. For NIE, for many of us who are teacher educators, teacher education is the heart of, the practicum is the heart of our teacher education program. It is the practicum where all they've learned in the courses, in the curriculum courses, in the psychology courses, education courses, all these things come into play in the practicum, where they actually go out to school to teach. And so in NIE, we believe that this practicum is extremely important. If students cannot pass this practicum, they cannot graduate as a teacher. So what happened when there's school closure? Your student teachers cannot go to school. What do we do? And when they teach, they cannot teach face-to-face. How do we prepare them when they cannot teach face-to-face during school closures? And because practicum is so important and is an accessible component of a teacher ed program, how can we assess that they're ready to graduate as full-fledged teachers? And how do we as teacher educators remain connected to our student teachers when they're faced with school closures during the practicum? So in NIE, it was fortunate that our students, when they had the practicum situation, they were already in school for 5 weeks. So the next 5 weeks of the practicum, they couldn't go to school because all schools were closed and they moved into home-based learning. So they were not assessed for the last 5 weeks of their practicum. And as someone said in the chat, they proved to be a help to the cooperating teacher. So they help the cooperating teacher because our young student teachers are very IT savvy. And the faculty had to meet with them after the practicum. They come together for reflection and discussion. It had to be done in Zoom. Because these teachers did not complete the full practicum period, in Singapore, we have an agency called the Academy of Singapore Teachers that do a lot of continuous professional development for our teachers. And so these teachers are being monitored that when they go out to schools, they will receive ongoing support. So they will be receiving help and support, even though they have graduated from NIE. So this is what we have done for NIE, and I wonder what was done in your own institutions. Post-CB, now our schools are reopened. When our schools are reopened, our Ministry of Education has instituted 1 day a week home-based learning, or sometimes within the semester, there is home-based learning. So when our student teachers are out, our teacher trainees are out in the schools during practicum, they help the cities in designing and planning the home-based learning lessons. But they will not be assessed because they are newbies. And so we do not want to assess them at this point in time. But during that 10-week practicum that they have with us, they will teach one home-based learning independently on their own. And this would be observed by the NIE supervisors and the cooperating teacher. but they will not be assessed. But we just give them the opportunity to teach an online lesson. And right now, our supervisors can go out and visit them in schools, but our students cannot return to campus to meet their supervisors because our supervisors supervises students from different schools. And because they supervise from different schools, we cannot allow intermingling across the schools. So the meeting with supervisor as a group of students under a particular supervisor is done by Zoom. So with all these changes, as teacher educators, we have to revisit our teacher education program. We have to re-examine our current program and ask ourselves these questions. We may not have all the answers to these questions now, but it's important to ask these questions and to find solutions and answers. Have we prepared our student teachers adequately to teach in a blended learning environment? Have we prepared them to be self-directed learners in online learning environment? Because we teach a lot online and we expect them to be self-directed learners. Can our student teachers be self-directed learners? I think it is easier for our student teachers than for our students in our schools. But we have to model and design our courses in ways to provide them opportunities to be self-directed learners. And of course, the question is, do we ourselves as teacher educators have the skills to teach online and engage our students in new and innovative ways? And as we revisit our teacher ed program, one of the things that we often forget to do in teacher education is to prepare our students to work with parents. When they go out to schools and graduate from NIE, they will say they're not prepared to work with parents. They don't know how to work with parents. And in the new normal, working with parents is very important because we have home-based learning. Going towards blended learning, even in the schools, will be the context of the new normal. So we have to prepare our student teachers to deal with the parents and to deal with the community. Are our parents, home-based learning, our parents ready for this? How can we as teacher educators, even now, support parents for this? And so in NIE, we provide materials for parents. Just like we heard yesterday, some Ministry of Education, some governments are providing materials for parents. In NIE, as teacher educators, we provide resources for parents, even though we don't really teach parents, but we wanted to reach the parents and provide this service to them. So we provide the resources for parents. We have videos and about how to work with children at home. And so we have different tips for parents. And even in many organizations like UNICEF, you have many parenting tips. I thought this idea from Stanford, when I read about it, was very interesting. Stanford has one of the best teacher education programs in the world. It's highly recognized. So they try to help their student teachers to work with the families that the students are from. And so they use role play. So they have an online seminar course. And in the online seminar course, the candidates have conversation with family members and role play conversations and dialogue with family members. And then after that is over, they do their reflection and discuss their role play together. And they talk about different ways to stay connected with families. In this country, some families are not English speaking, and they even use language translation apps to help them to communicate with Hispanic families they don't speak English, and so on. And so they focus a lot on communication with students and communication with families, and focus on the social emotional well-being. So I thought the idea of the role play is an idea of a design that we could consider in our teacher ed program. Again, have we prepared our student teachers to deal with inequities among our students? We heard about this yesterday in the report that were given, because the pandemic has really exacerbated existing inequities. And so in Singapore, what we do in dealing with inequities, for those who do not have laptops, our schools provided laptops for them to bring home. For those who have no internet access and dongles, we provide this internet access to them to bring home to do their work. And so in Singapore, we provide equipment to children who do not have it. But we also have a group of children where it is not safe for them to be at home with their parents, because these are our vulnerable children. So when our schools are closed, these children come back to school and their teachers return to school on some days to teach these children. They have a different timetable. And then we have families who are frontline workers, health workers. They cannot stay at home to teach their children or be with their children or to monitor their children. So these children also return to school. So we have issues like this in Singapore, and this is what we have done. And so when we talk about inequities, I'm a big fan about grouping and collaborative learning. And so even in online learning environment, how we design the group tasks for collaborative learning is very important. And how during the group tasks, we can have them across different diverse backgrounds so that they can get to know one another. So these are some ways that in our courses that we do as teacher educators, in our design of online learning, we can design group tasks and group work online for them and get them to mix across group. One of my colleagues is doing a piece of research called interest-driven curriculum. So in other words, in our courses that we run in our teacher ed institution, how can we give our student teachers some voice and some agency? Can they tell us what they're interested in, to learn and to consider? And we could include that within our teacher ed curriculum, so that when we model that in our curriculum, in NIE, or in our teacher education institution, our student teachers can also model that when they go out to schools. And also, a lot of role modeling and a lot of courses can be done that talk about teacher-student relationship and student-student relationship. My latest work is about listening pedagogy. And in listening pedagogy, what I'm trying to do with my teachers in the school, that we talk less and we listen more. We talk less and we listen more. Because much of the predominant mode of teaching in our schools is teacher talk and teacher recitation. And we find that when we talk less and when we listen more, and we have students in groups and they listen one another, there is greater community, greater collaboration that has developed within the classroom. And so we need to explore how that can be done even in online learning environments. So how do we therefore turn these issues and challenges and crises into opportunities? I think as teacher educators, we have to upskill and upgrade. We have to adapt to the changes. And what is an opportunity? I have found that there's so much that I can learn I am learning all the time, and training is given to me, both in the technology, as well as in the e-pedagogy, as well as other issues. And there's so much coaching. I'm a deep believer of team teaching. I'm a deep believer of teacher educators working together to co-teach a class. And when we co-teach and we work together and collaborate, we get feedback on our teaching, on ways of improving, and we get coaching in the process. So upskilling, reskilling, and cross-skilling is very important. We have to change our mindset. Who says that we are old? We are in the 60s. We cannot deal with technology. We can. We just have to change our mindset. We have to refocus. Some things are more important. Some things are less important. We have to revisit our vision. We have to consider our curriculum, consider our ways of teaching and modalities, and we have to think of assessment and how we do e-assessments. And really, we have to reimagine how things will be like in the new normal. It is not easy, but we have to work towards that. And so I think as teachers and teacher educators, I think we do have the mindset of learning. I think we learn a lot from our own students. I learn a lot from my students. That's why I love being a teacher, because I learn new things every day. And that I think is our disposition. But I think what is very difficult for us as adults is to unlearn old rules, knowledge and beliefs. Oh, I've learned that, I've done before. It's of no use, it's irrelevant, you know. So I remembered when we first started implementing technology in our courses. As a department head, I had a very hard time to get colleagues to consider using technology to teach. They would tell me, Christine, face-to-face is always better. Why must I use technology? If I can teach face-to-face, why must I use technology? They would tell me. But we know that technology opens new worlds, brings things that you do not expect. So, and today, we have no choice. We cannot be face-to-face. We have to teach with technology. And in this, as we think about our assumptions about technology, or even assumptions about pedagogy and curriculum, about teachers, about students, you know, we ask the question, for instance, how can I develop learner-driven experiences? Much of my teaching is teacher-centered. How can I be more student-centered? How can I make that transition? And some of our thinking, how can I give them more agency? I am one big believer that in assignments that I give to my students, I allow them to negotiate their assignments with me, as long as it's within a particular framework that has to be respected. But they have agency. They can negotiate their assignments with me. Okay, and when I give them a course outline to them, I say, this is what we're going to do this semester. Are these topics okay? Are there some topics you do not want? Are there other topics you want? I give them a voice. And that's when they feel that they own the course. They co-construct the course with us. And so when we move into looking at classrooms and our teaching, can we move into flipped classroom? If students can read about it, why do we tell them what they can read in the books and the articles that I've asked them to read? They can read before they come to my class. Or they can watch a video before they come to my class. And so how do I bring them and discuss? So when I bring them into my class, I flip it. And then in the class, we ask questions. Things we do not understand, things we have trouble with. And we get them to think more deeply about what they have read and what they make the meaning of what they have read and how they make meaning of that. So in the new normal, I think we really have to prioritize what is essential. I think we really, within our teacher ed institution, have to really examine very carefully. And when we add new courses, perhaps more courses dealing with technology and online and blended learning, we give more time to that. Perhaps more courses on perhaps about parent communication and family. We cannot add. And that's a problem with teacher education programs. We keep adding and adding and adding, but we don't, when we add, we don't take away things that are irrelevant. We are so afraid of taking away things that are irrelevant. So it's really important for us to prioritize what it is that is important in the new normal. So for the 21st century learners, the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read or write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. 21st century learners need 21st century teachers, and 21st century teachers need 21st century teacher educators. So while we prepare teachers for the new normal, we're in fact preparing them for the 21st century, where things are unpredictable, things are really uncertain, and that's what we're preparing them for. So what can we do to bring about a better new normal? I learned this from my friends in Philippines, and I thought it was really very interesting, a good framework. How do we adapt to the situation? How do we adopt new ways of doing things? And how can we be more adept with the new skills that are required in this challenge? And so one of the things I had to do, I am a lesson study pioneer for Singapore. And because lesson study, the heart of lesson study is classroom observations, our teachers cannot go and observe the lessons that we have planned for several weeks and observe the students' learning. And so what we had to do was that we had to video record the classroom observation. And I had to train the videographers on how to do the recording, how to take the video from a back view, looking at the teacher, but more importantly, because we are observing students learning, how the video can come from looking at the students from a side view. And these videos are edited. And before we met for a post-lesson discussion, all of us went through those videos. And actually, I learned from this experience when we did this adaptation, because we had the videos of the lessons, we were able to observe the students and the responses to the classroom tasks forward and backwards, and observe a particular student. And I could transcribe the discussion in a group and bring that discussion to the teachers and ask them, what do you think about this discussion? And that was a plus point because we could not do it and adapt to it, all right? So what can we do as teachers? Action. I think obviously the design of a blended learning experience to increase student agency and engagement is very important. I would suggest that I will leave it to Chirping to discuss more with you. But I think for us as teacher educators, we could curate shareable resources both online and in print. Because I think that's really very important. We had to provide more resources. Yesterday, we heard there were plenty of resources that the Ministry of Education give out to the schools. But as teacher educators, someone has to curate it. Someone has to say that this is relevant, not relevant, this is really something we shouldn't include, and the scope and sequence of that curriculum that we share with schools and with homes and families. And we have to create collaboration, connectedness, and community. But as I shared earlier, we have to nurture the well-being of students and ourselves and balance the content we're carrying. So in Singapore, because of the situation, we have a platform called the Student Learning Space. And it's in this student learning space that all teachers and NIE teacher educators have access to. And that is a repository of all our resources relevant to the curriculum. And both teachers and students can access anytime and anywhere. And it's used for both student self-directed learning and teacher facilitated learning. And what the teachers share is that this platform has enabled them to put into place active learning process, because within this shared space, there are ideas on how to bring about discussion, collaboration, and inquiry, and really help them to think more deeply about online learning and student collaboration. We even use social media, and there is a Facebook group called the Singapore Learning Designer Nurse Circle. And in this Facebook group, the number of teachers that registered with this Facebook has grown tremendously when schools were locked down. And so in this Facebook, a teacher can ask a question: does anyone know of an interactive web tool that allows students to manipulate a composite figure to see for themselves that a composite figure can be changed into a rectangle, allowing students to see that the parameter of the composite figure is the same as the parameter of the rectangle? So ask questions in this chat group and people respond using social media and so on to share ideas. And I think the Facebook is a very important medium for us to explore as teacher educators. And so as teacher educators, we do need to develop and be involved in collaborative practice, communities, and working at the boundaries. We have to find partners to support us in our work and go beyond the boundary that we normally work in. I'm a deep believer of professional learning communities, and we saw in this situation, teachers coming together, they co-plan, they co-teach, they co-assess, they co-reflect. So if teachers are doing that during the pandemic, why should we return to teaching in isolated silos? And so in our teacher ed programs and in our teacher ed community, we have to learn to work together and co-teach and collaborate together. In the well-being of ourselves and our teachers and our students, there are many things out there. For myself, I had to learn mindfulness practice because I had to be at home, because I was fearful and stressed, and because I was working with a lot of people who are undergoing depression and many other issues. I went on a course on mindfulness-based stress reduction program and learned about mindfulness. And in Singapore, some schools are bringing positive education and mindfulness into the classroom. And while they started doing it before the pandemic, I think this will become more important in the new normal. And in your country, you have so lovely outdoors. How can we use outdoor education to bring about rich learning environment for our students to do projects as opportunities for learning? So it is not the strongest of the species that survive, not the most intelligent, but the one that is most responsive to change.